The invasion began with a silence so heavy it felt unnatural, as if the very air was waiting to collapse under the weight of what hovered above. Across the world, people stopped what they were doing and stared at the sky, where immense black silhouettes blotted out the sun. The ships were vast, like floating cities, and their presence turned daylight into shadow. No one had imagined the first contact would be like this, without diplomacy, without words of peace. Only a single broadcast in 1,000 languages, declaring Earth property of the Dominion. At first, there was terror. Families fled into basements and subway tunnels. Cities fell quiet, and governments scrambled in confusion. But fear soon gave way to something far older, something etched deep into humanity's bones. Defiance. The first attacks were chaotic, reckless acts born from desperation. Civilians in Seoul hurled firebombs at drones, their flames staining the night sky. Farmers in rural Poland converted old tractors into makeshift armored vehicles and used them to ram Dominion patrols. In Kenya, villagers carried out nighttime ambushes, melting into savannah before reinforcements could arrive. The Dominion thought these were pathetic gestures, futile against their superior strength. But they underestimated the meaning behind them. These were not the actions of a species ready to surrender. These were sparks of something that could not be extinguished. In New York, resistance fighters rigged entire buildings to collapse, turning the city into a labyrinth of traps. When Dominion soldiers advanced down Fifth Avenue, skyscrapers fell around them, crushing columns of troops under thousands of tons of steel and glass. In the Amazon, warriors emerged from the jungle with poisoned arrows and guerrilla tactics, striking unseen, vanishing before the enemy could retaliate. In Russia's forests, hunters who had lived all their lives among wolves and snow turned the land itself into a weapon, luring Dominion patrols into icy rivers and frozen swamps. Every culture, every nation, every forgotten corner of the planet seemed to rise at once. Humanity was not an army. It was billions of stubborn, furious individuals, each with their own way of saying no. The invaders had believed themselves untouchable, their fleets unbreakable. Then came the night the London rocket tore through the belly of a warship. Built not by soldiers, but by engineers, mechanics, and welders, the crude missile streaked upward from an old shipyard and struck true. The detonation split the skies, and for the first time in countless campaigns, a Dominion cruiser fell. Its wreckage lit the River Thames in fire as the city roared with defiance. The galaxy may not have seen it, but Earth had. For the first time, humans whispered each other, "They can fall." News of the strike spread faster than the Dominion sensors could contain it. Across the stars, species long chained by conquest murmured in disbelief. A primitive world had done the unthinkable. But on Earth, it was not disbelief, it was fuel. Children in shelters carved the word into walls. Fighters painted it on ruined buildings. And ordinary men and women carried a memory of that explosion like a torch. The Dominion answered with fury, sending more fleets, leveling more cities, but the harder they struck, the harder humanity struck back. Entire subway networks became underground fortresses. Old factories roared back to life, repurposed to churn out improvised weapons. The invaders' strength was vast, but ours was something alien to them. The refusal to stop fighting even when logic demanded surrender. On the frozen plains of Siberia, a handful of villages resisted an entire armored battalion with nothing but hunting rifles and explosives buried in the snow. In Tokyo, hackers seized control of Dominion drones, turned them against their masters in a storm of betrayal. In the deserts of Nevada, retired pilots stole into hidden hangars and launched decades-old fighter jets, streaking into the sky against impossible odds. Humanity's history was written in rebellion, and now the full weight of that history pressed itself against the invaders. For every city they burned, 3 more rose in defiance. For every human they killed, a dozen more vowed vengeance. The Dominion had expected a conquest. What they received was a war unlike any they had ever fought. They had believed Earth would kneel, but Earth did not know how. From the highest skyscrapers to the deepest forests, from crowded cities to desolate tundra, humanity fought with teeth bared and fire in its veins. And as the war raged on, a terrifying truth began to ripple not only through the Dominion ranks, but across the galaxy itself. This world, this defiant, furious, impossible world, would not be broken. It would not surrender. It would not bow. It would not be invaded. The Dominion responded with a precision only an empire built on conquest could wield. They unleashed orbital bombardments, scorching entire districts into ash, believing that terror would crush the will to resist. Instead, the ruins became rallying grounds. In Paris, as flames consumed what was left of the Champs-Élysées, survivors dragged twisted steel into barricades and armed themselves with scavenged weapons. In Lagos, entire neighborhoods united into resistance cells, turning every street corner into an ambush point. The invaders could not understand it. Why a species so clearly outmatched refused a break? To them, conquest was inevitable. To us, slavery was unthinkable. Everywhere they struck, something unexpected happened. The harder they pushed, the tighter humanity pulled together. Old divisions faded, not because people suddenly agreed, but because survival demanded it. Soldiers who once faced each other across hostile borders now fought side by side. American special forces worked alongside Russian commandos in the frozen north, sharing weapons and rations as though they had always been allies. Chinese and Indian engineers sat together in bunkers, pooling their knowledge to build jammers that blinded alien communications. For the first time in history, humanity became one people, not out of choice but necessity. The Dominion did not understand unity born of desperation. They saw it as chaos, disorganized and weak. Yet that chaos became their nightmare. A convoy destroyed in Afghanistan by bombs buried under mountain roads. A strike team ambushed in Brazil by guerrillas who melted into the favelas. A battleship sabotage in orbit when dock workers in South Africa smuggled explosives aboard under the cover of their daily labor. Humanity was not a single army marching in step. It was a billion blades hidden in the dark, each cutting from a different angle. And then came the day in Mexico City. A Dominion command post had been established in the ruins of an old stadium, its towering walls repurposed as fortifications. To hold the city was to hold the region, and the invaders believed it secure. But the people of Mexico thought otherwise. Under the cover of night, entire families emerged from tunnels carved beneath the streets. Mechanics brought with them stolen Dominion power cells. Farmers carried canisters of fuel. Musicians brought drums, not as weapons, but as signals to coordinate the chaos. When dawn broke, the stadium erupted. Flames licked its edges as humans swarmed over the walls. The Dominion fought back fiercely, their advanced weapons cutting down countless attackers. But the resistance would not stop. Every fallen fighter was replaced by two more, until at last the command post was overrun. The invaders fled the city, harried by a force that was not an army, but something far worse, an outraged population that refused to surrender its home. The galaxy was listening now. Smugglers whispered tales of Earth's defiance in the shadowy corners of spaceports. On worlds where rebellion had been stamped out for centuries, the story spread like sparks. A Tier 3 civilization, barely capable of leaving its own solar system, was holding its ground against one of the greatest empires in the galaxy. The Dominion laughed at first, dismissing the rumors as exaggeration. But the captured footage of the London strike, the crumbling of the stadium in Mexico City, and the reports of Dominion warships sabotaged by farmers and engineers could not be silenced forever. The impossible was happening. The Dominion was bleeding. On Earth, hope had become a weapon as powerful as any rifle. Children painted resistance symbols on the walls of bombed-out schools. Elders passed down stories of past wars, reminding the young that humans had always been survivors. Everywhere, the words appeared, "We will not kneel." It was no longer just defiance. It was identity. To be human now meant to resist, to fight, to claw back every inch no matter the cost. The Dominion commanders grew frustrated. Their strategy had worked on countless other worlds, but against Earth, nothing held. They tried overwhelming firepower. Cities were leveled, millions killed. Yet survivors emerged from rubble with their fists still clenched. They tried propaganda, broadcasting promises of mercy to those who cooperated. But those who collaborated were rejected by their own people. They tried cutting off resources, burning crops and poisoning rivers. But humanity had survived ice ages, famines, and plagues. We adapted, always faster than they expected. And with every adaptation, we learned. Engineers tore apart captured weapons, studying them in hidden workshops lit by candles. Mechanics scavenged Dominion armor, reforging it into makeshift shields. Hackers who once fought for money or ideology now shared their skills freely, piercing alien networks and turned their own systems against them. Every skirmish became a classroom. Every loss taught us how to fight better. We were evolving in real time, a species under fire that refused to vanish. For the Dominion, this was no longer a conquest. It was a quagmire, a war they thought would be won in weeks stretched into months. Each sunrise found more of their troops dead, their ships scarred, their confidence eroding. Humanity, a species they had mocked as primitive, was dragging them into a fight they could not win quickly. And the galaxy was watching with wide, astonished eyes. And somewhere in the ruins, whispered in 1,000 tongues, a single promise echoed louder than the roar of warships. This was not just a fight for survival. This was a message to the stars themselves. Earth would never be anyone's prize. The first captured Dominion rifle was a mystery, sleek and alien in its design, humming with energy that no human engineer could immediately explain. It had fallen into the hands of a resistance cell in Warsaw after a brutal ambush. At first, it was nothing more than a trophy, a symbol that Dominion soldiers were not untouchable. But in the flickering light of an underground bunker, engineers, electricians, and even university students crowded around it, dismantling it piece by piece. Wires were mapped, crystals studied, circuits sketched onto stolen paper. For weeks, they worked without rest, and when the weapon finally hummed back to life in human hands, a cheer rose through the tunnels so loud it shook the dust from the ceiling. The first human-fired alien rifle spat energy across the bunker, searing a hole in the wall. It was crude, dangerous, unstable, but it worked. Humanity had begun to turn the enemy's tools into our own. Soon, these stories multiplied. In India, scientists repurposed captured Dominion drones into scouts, sending them back into the sky with new commands. In Chicago, mechanics built an armored vehicle out of scavenged tank parts and alien plating, a monstrous machine that roared through the streets, shrugging off enemy fire. In Australia, hackers found a way to slip into Dominion communication lines, broadcasting false orders that led alien patrols into ambushes. The war was still brutal, losses still immense, but now there was a rhythm to it. We weren't just surviving. We were learning, adapting, evolving faster than the invaders could comprehend. The Dominion had expected resistance. They had not expected creativity. They fought with overwhelming strength. But strength alone was predictable. Humans fought with imagination, with desperation forged into cunning. An oil rig in the North Sea was turned into a fortress, its towers bristling with stolen alien weapons, its engines converted into massive flamethrowers that drove back an entire Dominion landing force. In the Sahara, resistance fighters lured enemy machines into sandstorms, blinding their sensors and leaving them vulnerable to well-placed explosives. Everywhere the Dominion turned, humans had twisted the terrain, the technology, even their own broken cities into traps. The galaxy's whispers grew louder. On occupied worlds far from Earth, enslaved species listened with hope and disbelief. For generations they had known only submission. Their rebellions crushed before they began. But now, in the dark corners of mines and factories, workers murmured about the humans, a species that should have crumbled, yet instead was bleeding the Dominion dry. Smugglers spread recordings of the London rocket, the fall of Mexico City, the eerie footage of Dominion soldiers retreating under a hail of improvised firepower. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion's aura of invincibility cracked. On Earth, the crack widened into an opportunity. A coalition was forming, not led by governments, but by necessity itself. In the ruins of Geneva, once a city of diplomacy, resistance leaders gathered in secret. There were no flags, no borders, just survivors. Soldiers, farmers, engineers, hackers, doctors, men and women who had crawled out of different corners of the world to stand at the same table. They argued, of course, because humanity always argued. But when the noise settled, one truth united them. The Dominion could not be allowed to hold Earth. The plan was not conquest, not total victory. It was survival through defiance. Survival until the Dominion learned that this planet was not worth the cost of keeping. Their first great offensive came in the skies over the Pacific. Dominion fleets patrolled the ocean, hunting for hidden human bases. But the resistance had spent months preparing. A network of submarines, converted cargo ships, and hidden island fortresses coordinated in silence, waiting for the right moment. When the trap was sprung, the ocean itself seemed to rise against the invaders. Missiles streaked upward from beneath the waves. Stolen alien weapons fired from shorelines, and hacked drones turned their fury on their former masters. For the first time, a Dominion fleet retreated not because it had conquered its objective, but because it was losing. The Battle of the Pacific was not a clean victory. Thousands of humans died. Ships were lost. Cities were scarred. But the image of Dominion warships retreating from Earth's ocean sent shockwaves across the stars. In their frustration, the Dominion turned to terror campaigns. They began targeting hospitals, refugee camps, anything that could break morale. But if history had taught humanity anything, it was how to endure suffering. Doctors carried out surgeries in candlelit basements. Children studied in bombed-out schools, and farmers planted crops in the shadows of smoking craters. Pain did not silence us, it steeled us. With every act of cruelty, the Dominion only deepened the resolve of the people they thought would surrender. And then came the moment that truly shook the galaxy. In the mountains of Chile, resistance fighters captured not just weapons, but a living Dominion pilot. For the first time, humanity looked into the eyes of their oppressor, without the barrier of armor or machine. The alien was taller, stronger, bred for domination. Yet in its eyes there was something no one had expected: fear. It had seen the way humans fought, the way they refused to die quietly, the way they twisted every defeat into another lesson. It had seen the look in the eyes of the very species it was sent to conquer, and it was afraid. That fear spread, slowly at first, then faster. Across occupied worlds, whispers grew bolder. If humans could defy the Dominion, why not others? If Earth refused to kneel, why not their planet too? The Dominion had not just underestimated humanity's strength. They had underestimated the power of the example humanity was becoming. The day Earth refused to be invaded was not a single day at all. It was 1,000 days, 1,000 battles, 1,000 acts of resistance stitched together by willpower and fury. And though the war was far from over, though the cost was higher than anyone had dreamed, one truth had become unshakable, echoing not only across Earth but through the very stars themselves. This world, this stubborn and furious species, could not be broken. The Dominion thought Earth's defiance was a flare that would burn itself out, a final scream of a dying species before inevitable silence. But they were wrong. With every passing month, humanity's defiance grew sharper, more coordinated. Resistance cells that once acted alone began to weave themselves into a single, hidden network stretching across continents. In basements, caves, and mountains, a quiet unity was forming, one message passing through encrypted whispers and hack signals: we are not prey, we are the storm. The first off-world strike was born not from governments but from desperation. In Cape Town, a group of resistance fighters had captured a small Dominion shuttle during a supply run. It was battered in the fight, half its systems fried by explosives, but engineers saw in it something extraordinary: a key. For weeks they worked in secret, scavenging alien alloys, splicing human electronics into places they didn't belong, learning to coax life from a machine that should have been far beyond their reach. Pilots volunteered for the test, knowing it was likely suicide. Yet when the shuttle rose from the ground, sputtering and groaning, but flying under human control, cheers erupted through the bunker. For the first time in history, Earth had a ship not made by human hands, but flown by human will. The mission was small, almost laughably so by Dominion standards. A raid on an orbital supply depot, barely guarded, little more than a node in the Empire's endless chains. But when the shuttle slipped into orbit and unleashed its stolen weapons, something impossible happened. The depot exploded, scattering debris across the night sky. For the Dominion, it was an inconvenience. For Earth, it was everything. Humanity had reached into space not as explorers, but as fighters, and we had drawn blood. That single strike lit a fire across the planet. Songs were written, murals painted on the sides of ruins. We reached them, we hurt them. Children stared at the stars not with fear anymore, but with fierce hope. The galaxy, watching through the whispers of smugglers and slaves, saw something even more terrifying. A species still crawling out of its cradle had just stepped into the stars with stolen wings and turned them into weapons. The Dominion doubled down. Fleets hovered over cities, raining fire on anything that moved. They tried to choke the life out of Earth with blockades, sealing the skies so nothing could pass. But humanity had always thrived in blockades. Smugglers found ways through. Submarines carried supplies across oceans. Hidden launch sites fired missiles that tore holes in their nets. Every move the Dominion made was met with an answer not perfect, but enough. And each answer came faster than before. Humanity was learning too quickly, adapting too wildly. For every weapon the Dominion used, within weeks some human mind found a way to dull its edge. In the mountains of Afghanistan, a team of scientists and fighters unveiled something that changed the war again. The first hybrid weapon. A Dominion plasma core mounted onto a human-built launcher, stabilized with parts stolen from power stations, and guided by software hacked together from old satellites. It was ugly, fragile, and dangerous even to its wielder. But when it fired, it cut through a Dominion walker like paper. Soon, resistance cells everywhere begged for the schematics. From scrap and ruin, a new arsenal was being born, half human, half alien, entirely ours. The Dominion's commanders began to argue among themselves. Reports leaked into the wider galaxy. Earth was not falling as expected. Entire battalions were being tied down by civilians armed with nothing more than homemade explosives. Ships were retreating from battles that should have been trivial. Casualties were rising to levels the Dominion had never faced from a single Tier 3 world. The words no commander wished to speak were whispered nonetheless. The humans are different, and perhaps the most terrifying proof came in Antarctica. There, hidden beneath the ice, the Resistance had constructed a base unlike any before. Scientists from dozens of nations worked together in silence, their breath freezing in the cold air as they pieced together the wreckage of a fallen Dominion frigate. For months they toiled, building something audacious, something impossible, a ship that was neither human nor Dominion, but both. When it finally rose from the ice, its engines roaring with stolen power, Earth took its first step toward building a fleet. Small, fragile, untested, but a fleet nonetheless. The galaxy trembled. No enslaved world had ever managed such a feat. To fight back was one thing. To steal the Empire's own tools and make them your own was another. The Dominion had wanted Earth to be a warning, an example of the futility of resistance. Instead, Earth had become a beacon. Across the stars, whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into shouts. On distant planets, oppressed species began to carve the word into walls, into machines, into their very skin. Human, and on Earth itself, the truth hardened like iron. The war was not over. The losses were unbearable. But humanity had already done the unthinkable. We had refused to kneel, refused to be broken, refused to accept invasion. And now, standing on the edge of something greater than survival, one truth became clear to every soldier, every child, every survivor who looked to the sky. The day Earth refused to be invaded was only the beginning.